Hey, this is Double R. I wanted to tell you that Anchor by Spotify is a great and easy way to make a podcast with everything you need and all in one place. Anchor has the tools to allow you to record, edit your podcast straight from your phone or your computer. When hosting with Anchor, you can distribute your podcast to all listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Best of all, it's totally free. So go down the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. This is the Let's Roll Podcast with your host, Double R. What up, everybody? It's your host at Rose and Mo's Double R, and this is the Let's Roll Podcast. And today, we're going to talk about the 1 year podcast anniversary on September 27th, 2021. I started the podcast. Technically, I started the podcast actually earlier than that in October, in August. I started it in August, but I'm going to consider September 27th the actual anniversary. And let's talk about our first year being a podcaster. And we'll talk about that and much more right after this. So let's talk about our first year of being a podcaster, our first anniversary, some of the things that we've learned along the way, some of the milestones that we're hitting now, and, all that. So I started a podcast actually in August. I think it was late August. But I'm considering September 27th the podcast anniversary. And I started this podcast, one, for something to do. I'm disabled. I don't work a regular job. As I will touch on in a future episode, I had moved back home, so I'm living here at my mom's house, and I just didn't have a whole lot to do. And when I first moved to my mom's house, I started the gaming channel, and I did that for a little while, and on YouTube, and I still do it. I just don't do it as much or as often. And I wanted something that was closer to being a DJ, so to speak. And so I decided, hey, I can do a podcast. I have done a podcast before, as you may all know, because we did some episodes about me and my friend TT, or T Rich, and we did his podcast way back when podcasts weren't as popular. Like, they were starting to get popular. And he had a dream of doing a podcast and it blowing up and getting good, and and just doing that. But life gets in the way sometimes, and it just didn't sustain itself. So also, podcast was, like I said, it was barely getting popular, and you just didn't have the, like, there's so much thing on YouTube now that you could look up about podcasting and how to start it, tips and tricks. When we did that first podcast, we were doing maybe one episode every 2 weeks or something like that, maybe even every month. I don't know. We didn't have that many episodes at all. Like, we only had maybe 8, maybe 9 episodes. And we did it what we called our seasons. We did it like 3 seasons, but we didn't really have that many episodes. And some episodes were multi-parts. I had like 2, 3, 4 parts. It was fun doing it, and the equipment, the equipment that we had was not, I'm not saying it was terrible, but it isn't what it is today. We have way better equipment nowadays to do the podcast and everything. So So we had fun doing it, and so when I decided to do my own podcast, I was like, "This is something I could do. It could be easy." Blah blah blah. I would have fun, and yes, I would like to make money with it. I don't necessarily. I'm not necessarily doing it to be famous by any means, but I would like it to be somewhat popular and feel like I'm not just sitting here talking to myself sometimes, which I do a lot. But I'm not really in it for the fame. Not really, technically, not really in it for the money. But it would be nice to make some kind of money with it because it would just help in the long run, and it helped keep the podcast going and be able to do bigger and better things with it. In the first year that we have been doing this, we have made slight changes here and there, uh, live and learn a few things. Early on, I was just gonna do episode and just talk as long as I wanted to, or what I wanted to talk about, and blah blah blah. But and the initial idea was to relate it more to DJing. Um, I found Anchor, and Anchor.fm is who I use, as you know, with the commercials at the beginning of the episodes. And with uh, uh, Anchor.fm, it is a sister company of Spotify, and you can use Spotify music or music from Spotify in your episodes. And I got real excited about that. I was like, oh man, I could do episodes about different artists and play two or three of their songs during the episode, or I had that idea at first. Well, then I found out that if you do Anchor, you can play Spotify music, but you can't take any subscribers or listeners' donation. So, in other words, you can't take any money or profit off anything about your episode, at least through Anchor, and so you're not allowed to use the music. But if I didn't have any listener support or subscription and all that, if I just strictly just did Anchor, and I'm not even sure it's sponsors, or I guess the sponsorship part would be okay. I mean, I guess it's allowed to, allow you to use music from Spotify on the sponsor part, but not, um, but not any listener support or subscription. So I really wanted to have that just as an option for people to support the podcast and everything. So I kind of threw the idea of using Spotify music on episodes out and kind of did away with the DJ part. So I still had to figure out what my podcast was going to be. And I came up with a concept of taking topics, different topics, and associating them with having a disability, or, what the challenges are via whatever the topic is or whatever. So that was my basis of my podcast. And so I could take things that are happening in pop culture. I could take, going out to eat, or going to the movies, or going shopping, or going to vote, or, all kinds of things. And I would look for ideas by just watching like YouTube videos. I'd have something happen in my life or whatever. I just talk about all the experiences that I and challenges that I go through. But I also wanted to do those episodes where I talk about um, things that I have an opinion on or a view on, and 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 whatnot. So that was the basis of my podcast, and I decided, okay, let's do this. Then I had to come up with a name for it, and I did Let's Roll. But then when I looked up the name on Google, there was already a podcast called Let's Roll, and it was mainly about cars and you know going to car shows and stuff like that. So I was like, man, I still want to use Let's Roll. So I just added to my name podcast. So it's the Let's Roll podcast. And the Let's Roll part is because I'm in a wheelchair. So that ties it in. Then I got on Fiverr and found a logo person and gave them the idea of what I wanted my logo to be, what the name of the podcast was, and that's where you got the round logo with the LRP in it, and that became the Let's Roll podcast logo. And then so that I had my logo, I had my name, I had my hosting. Now I got to put some episodes together. And so the first one that actually came out, but for some reason it got deleted and I had to re-upload it. So it's out of order. Excuse me. It's out of order when you go look at the podcast episode list, but it's all about the podcast. And so I just briefly give you, not briefly because it's like 20-minute long episode, but basically talk about why I'm starting it, what I'm going to do with it, what I hope to do with it, blah, blah, blah. And then I believe the next episode, let me bring it up here and I'll tell you what, like kind of what the order happened the first couple of episodes here. But I think the next episode, if I'm not mistaken, was I want to say WTF 2020. Yes. So I did All About the podcast. Then I did the next episode I did, which was almost an hour long, was 2020. What WTF, And in that episode, I talked about, the beginning of the pandemic, all the things that we're going through, so on. And then I would do episodes like Last American Virgin, where I talk about the movie The Last American Virgin. I did 50-Year-Old Gamer. I did Wonderful Toys. And Wonderful Toys was cool because it was the first time I actually had a guest on. And it was an old friend that I grew up with. And he collects toys and retro stuff like that. And, flips them, collects them, that. So we did that episode. But when he was here, and we recorded 3 episodes. So we did The Wonderful Toys. We did My Kiss, which was all about the rock band Kiss and our love for it. And then we did one with him on air guitar. His stage name is Ariachi, and he's a professional air guitarist and does competitions. And that became my number 1 episode until this new season. So let's talk about seasons real quick. I initially wanted to do seasons as in a 3-month time span. So every 3 months there would be a new season. And that was my first concept of doing seasons for the podcast. And so when I set out for that, I was like, okay, that'll work out. So it worked out roughly that we went to the end of the year, December. Roughly gave me, it was a little bit more than 3 months, but that was my first season. I ended it. I ended the first season in December. And then I started back up in January with the second season. And so I was going to go 3 months, like January, February, March, in the second season, but doing more research. Now I'm constantly doing research, constantly looking at things about podcasting and, how to improve it, whatnot. I reached out to a couple of groups on Facebook to ask them how do you do your seasons? And most of them said they do it from, just say, January to December. That's one whole season. And then I asked the question, how many episodes do you put out? And majority, on the average, most people put out like 1 episode a week. Well, I was putting out 2 episodes a week. And so I kind of went down to one for a little while and then saw that that was not necessarily working. So then I went back up to 2. And now I try my best to do 2 episodes a week. And as of this recording right now, I'm like 1 episode behind because I didn't have anything ready for last week. But sometimes that happens, you know. Life gets in the way sometimes, and I can't get an episode done or recorded, or I can't get the guests that I want to have on the episode scheduled, and whatever it is. And so the first season, now going back to the first season, I did 26 episodes that first season, and that's why I had this plan about doing 3 months a season, and then there would be like 26 to 28 episodes a season. But when I decided to not do that and just continue season 2 for the whole year, then that 3 month thing kind of went away. So so now currently all seasons will go from January to December, and that will count for a season. So right now we're in second season. Later on this year, we will also hit another milestone, and that will be our 100th episode. And I can't wait. It's amazing to know that I have put out 100 episodes. And then with that being said, then the other issue, or not issue, but thing that I wanted to learn or know what was best is the episode length. Now, as you know, for those that have listened to the podcast, you know that my lengths vary. But I did need somewhat of a minimum. Like, I needed a minimum length. Like, so that's what I shoot for. But if it goes over, fine. So I have a minimum and a maximum that I try to stick with. Doesn't always work. Doesn't mean I always will stick with that. It just, for the basics, I try to keep my minimum. I try to keep around 30 minutes. Sometimes it's a little bit shorter, and sometimes it's not. And then the maximum I want to do is 45 minutes. But sometimes those kind of run over. So I did my second popular episode that I did this year was when I interviewed a young lady that has the same condition I have, and she was starring on a Netflix series called Raising Dion, and I interviewed Sammy Haney, and she is an actor, young lady, very nice, very funny, and so I did an interview with her, and it was the first time I was doing an interview, and I was kind of nervous, and I kind of cut the interview kind of short by the episode length because I was kind of nervous. Plus, she's a young girl, and I didn't know at the time, I didn't know how to conduct an interview with basically a young girl or a child. And so I asked her some basic questions and that. And so I realized the interview was just too short. So I needed something else to go with it. So I asked her mom and dad if I could interview them and get their perspective of not only raising Sammy with a medical condition or disability, but what it was like on maybe the set. Her being an actor, what does she go through? What are the challenges and blah, blah, blah. So I took 2 different interviews, stuck them together in one big, long episode, and that has become my most popular episode to date right now. And it is at 198, I believe. I'll double check that for you just here in a second. Let's see. Let's go back. But yeah, I believe it's at 198. Let's see, I'm trying to find it here. Um, keep going the wrong way. Okay, yeah. Let's see. Yes, it's at 198. I have 198 listeners on that one episode. And so that is my most popular. So my two most popular episodes right now as we speak is the Sammy Hamey interview and the Ariachi episode. So I've had fun. I really have had fun doing this podcast. And I hope to continue it. I realized the other day, though, that I'm kind of running out of ideas of episodes. So hopefully, I can come up with some episodes on a consistent basis. Maybe have more guests on because it's. I will say this: when I have a guest on and I'm interviewing or talking or having a conversation with somebody, those episodes seem to do better because it's not just me rambling on like I am right now. So I want to try to have more guests on, more, most of my guests so far have been mostly friends that I either grew up with or, we did, like with T Rich or TT, I did a podcast with him. I coached basketball. I coached him in men's basketball, sorta, and then me and him both did youth basketball. So those were things that we were able to, you know, able to get together and talk about. And then we did some other episodes where we talked about different topics that we would joke about or whatever. So I I tend to have people that I, you know, are basically friends, but I would like to get to a point where I could talk to some kind of maybe celebrity or something like that. So I don't know. I don't know if that will happen or not. But it is better when there is somebody else um, here and we're talking. I also, in that first season, I did the Let's Roll Podcast Awards. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that this season or not. I'm debating on doing it because it was just kind of something I wanted to. I needed content, so I threw it together and you know rewarded things from the episodes that I had at the time. I might do it again. I don't know if that's something that you would like for me to do. Hit me up. Go to the website, theletsrollpodcast.com, and you can send me a message and say, "Hey, yeah, do it." I don't know. I do have to come up with content, so we'll see what happens. Um, I also want to take this moment to thank all the people that have appeared on my podcast so far. And starting off with my friend Randy Ariachi. He was my first guest, did 3 episodes with him, and they were really fun and enjoyable. I tried to get him back for the Prince episode that I did with another guest that I'll mention here in a minute. But unfortunately, we weren't able to get that worked out. But hopefully, I can get him on the podcast again in a future episode. And then my next guest was TT or T Rich. I want to thank him because he actually got me started in podcasting back in the day, and I always have fun with when he's on the podcast. I enjoy our banter back and forth with each other. We have a unique friendship where I can pretty much say anything to him, and he doesn't take offense to it or anything for that matter. I mean, there has been occasion where he's gotten offended or mad, but for the most part, he knows who I am. He knows the type of person I am, and you could you could say something about me, and he would just look at you and go, "Nah, that's not him." Um, so I'd like to thank him, and then I would like to thank Sammy Haney for coming on. My first technical celebrity, if you want to say it like that. Um, Enjoyed her coming on. Look forward to interviewing her again. Maybe I'm going to set that up because she's got new projects out and like to give her a chance to come on and talk about her new projects and everything. And then I had another special guest, which was TT's girlfriend, uh, came on, and I'm drawing a blank here. This is so bad. Um, I believe her name is Jen or Jenny, I think. I'm so bad. I apologize for not knowing the once again I'm going backwards again. But she came on. She's a teacher, Uvalde. Let's see. Trying to see what her name is. Jenny. Yeah, her name was Jenny. My bad. I'm not using her full name, and I apologize if you're listening to this, Jenny. But yeah, she came on. She's a teacher here in Texas, and she came on and was gracious enough to come on and talk about the Uvalde mass shooting with me. And I will have to say this to someone. I'm not saying they're the same in any way, but it was my Trayvon Martin type episode that I did with TT in the original podcast that we did together. And she came on. She was gracious and came on to give her point of view and talk about the mass shooting. And it's an hour and 33-minute episode. So it's one of my longer episodes. Currently, it has 49 listens. It's a good listen. I would encourage people to go listen to it. And again, my podcast is all about my view, my experiences, and my opinions. And you don't have to see it the same way I do. You don't have to have the same opinion I do. You can disagree with my opinion, but it's a way for me to talk about things that are interesting to me. Um, and so the Uvalde mass shooting, is something that when I pick pick a topic, sometimes it doesn't relate to me at all. Like as far as I know, there was no children with special needs, especially physically disabled children. And could I take it from a point of view of what would happen if I was in that situation? Hey, yes, I could, but it was more of that particular episode was more of a topic about about really about guns and this and how we're so obsessed in this country about the ability to bear arms. And so it was just a topic I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to bring Jenny on because I wanted to get her view from a teacher's point of view. And not only that, she's a teacher here in Texas. So it was great having her on, and she gave a lot of insight and everything. So I encourage you to go check it out. And my next guest that has appeared, I believe, I think my next guest was Tony Jacobson, a fellow OIer, also a fellow DJ, and the first episode we did was just basically I was just interviewing him about his experience with being disabled, and what he had going on at the time, and had a really good episode. And then I went on his podcast and did. Actually, I think I did his podcast first, and then he came and did mine. But he was my third my third guest, and it was great. Um, I believe I had a guest before him, which was I'll call him my roommate. He lives here with me. His name is Izzy, and me and him did a couple of episodes about movies, and I think we did Batman, and uh, we did the thing on the Batman. We did one on Spider Man. So he was technically my third guest, and then Tony was my fourth guest. And then, but going back to Tony, then we also did an episode together of The Love for Prince, which we talked about the music artist Prince. Because we're two DJs and, in that industry, so to speak, but we also like music. So we sat there and had a good time talking about that. And then my next guest and final guest so far would be Paula. And Paula also has what I have, also disabled, as I have said many times. And we did what was called Wishbone Day, which is a day that we bring awareness to osteogenesis imperfecta, which is the condition that we have. We both agree that we don't like to call it bone disease because we don't believe it's a disease. We just believe it's a condition. But anyway, we did Wishbone Day. We did a two-parter on that one. And then I just recently had her on to talk about DACA and immigration and all that and how it affected her because she came from Colombia when she was 5. So make sure you check out all of those different episodes with all my different guests so far. And I thank all of them for appearing on the podcast. I'm sure that most of them are going to come back on in the future and do more episodes with me and stuff. So then the other thing I tried to do with this podcast is I tried to do a weekly episode that just talked about what was going on that, the previous week or, kind of pop culture or just things going on in the world. And I did about 3 episodes of that, but I found that those were a little bit harder to do only because it's just me and I'm trying to figure out, how much I want to say about each thing or and whatever. And it wasn't doing very good as far as listenings go. And so I just kind of went, okay, I'm not gonna worry about doing a weekly deal. Maybe if the podcast got a little bit more popular, maybe I could figure out a way to do something like that on a more routine basis. But I just went back to doing episodes that are based on kind of different topics and stuff. Does not mean that I wouldn't take something that was going on in the world and talk about it and give my view on it or whatever. There's plenty of things I want to talk about. But basically, guys, that's 1 year anniversary of the podcast. Also, want to touch on what I started with as far as doing the podcast. I initially got a Zoom. I forget what it is, but I got a Zoom recorder. I forget the name, but anyway, I got the Zoom recorder. Started with that initially. Found some software online that I like to edit, and I started using that. Then I went to a Zoom P8, PodTrack P8, and I used that for a lot of my episodes. I would say probably. I don't know if I got it at the end of 21 or if I got it a little bit after 21, but I ain't got it right at the end of 21. I got the Zoom PA. So most of my first season episodes is just recorded on this recorder. Um, I think it's an H8 or something like that. And then I switched to the Zoom PodTrack. Uh, we'll call it a podcast mixer. And so I did most of my episodes on that. And also I don't know if you noticed, if you listen to older episodes or whatever, but I think I've improved a lot since I started because I gotten better at editing. The the equipment has improved. I'm now recording all episodes on the Rodecaster Pro 2 along with the Rode Pod mics. I got the Rode Arm, so I'm pretty much Rode out now. But I have the Zoom as a backup in case anything went down because when I did get the Rodecaster, the first one I got, it had a problem with it that come to find out it was a common problem on the units that were first released. And what it was is I have sound pads that I can play my theme music, my break music and my outro. And if I even hit anything on the desk or if I just hit the desk itself, it would set off one of the pads. And so it was kind of messed up. I think I only recorded maybe one or two episodes on that particular unit at the time. And then I sent it back, got a refund, and then reordered it from another company. And now I got it all set up. It's great. Don't have any issues so far. So I've improved the equipment. Oh, and then between time, I actually got a little small uh, Zoom P. I think it's P4. Little small little recording unit for podcasting. So I can actually go out on location somewhere and record a podcast episode or whatever and still have all the break music and everything that I need already in the system. So I can practically do a whole episode without really editing very much. I still edit a little bit. Some of them I don't. I just go ahead and let them be what they are. And because the Rodecaster does such a great job with a lot of the things that I would edit that I don't have to edit. So, but yeah, the equipment has improved, the quality has improved. I've improved. I've learned a lot of tips and tricks, and I encourage anybody that wants to have a voice, wants to speak, what they feel, and no matter how people view it, it could, um, as I always say, there's always consequences in your actions and what you do in life. And so just be willing to accept the consequences, whatever those are. But if you wanna get your voice out there and speak on things that you're passionate about or you like to do or whatever the topic or subject or type of podcast you want to do, make sure you get out there and just do it, jump into it. To be honest, you don't have to have real fancy equipment to start off with. You could do it with your cell phone, your computer. You can find a way. You don't have to have the best mic. Now, I'm not saying that your the quality shouldn't be good, but it doesn't have to be the best starting off. Just be creative and take your listeners on a journey of your growth because probably listening to my very first podcast episode and listening to my last podcast episode, you could probably tell a big difference. Um, don't be afraid to make mistakes because you're going to. And I might do an episode about how to do a podcast as far as the tips and tricks of what you should do or not do, or what I view as what you should or should not do when it comes to those. But again, I can't believe it's our 1 year anniversary and we hit that first milestone. The next one to hit is the 100th episode, and it only goes on from there. I will say this, all season one, except for All About the Podcast, is behind a subscription. Um, and if you wanted to go back and listen to those, please consider subscribing. It's only $1 a month. And then probably, I'll say starting probably in October, I will start putting some of the our season 2 episodes behind the subscription. So right now you can listen to all the episodes that are available right now. And I'll probably say in October, I'll probably put at least the first 3 months of the second season behind a subscription. And it's just, and I'll be honest with you guys, the money will go right back into the podcast. It will go in for equipment. It will go in to services, to promote it, whatever. But it's going back into the podcast. So your help would be appreciated. It's 99 cents a month. And it would be, I would feel so blessed and honored if you were willing to part with 99 cents a month. But there's also other ways you can support the podcast, and that doesn't even cost anything. That's just telling people about the podcast. Share the website, which is theletsrollpodcast.com. You can also go on the YouTube channel, which I don't have a shortened YouTube channel name yet because I have to reach 100 subscribers. But that's another way you can support the channel. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Get that up to at least 100 so I can give you an easy link. But those have all, I don't want to say they have all the episodes yet, but I upload a audio episode from the podcast every Saturday. So it'd be an older episode, but they always release on Saturday. And those are not under a paywall. So you can also catch the whole season in season 2 on YouTube if you like to do it that way. And then we have a merch store. We have Patreon, but I haven't promoted Patreon enough, and there's not any supporters on there yet for me to really want to push that much. But we do have a Patreon. We do have a merch store. There's all kinds of different ways that you can support us. But the easiest way to support us is, one, listen to the podcast, give us a rating, give us a review, and share it. And the more people that know about it and more people that listen, then the bigger this podcast can get. But again, it's been 1 year, been one great full year of podcasting, and I look for more to come. With all that being said, remember, check out theletsrollpodcast.com. And as always, until next time, let's roll.
Hey, this is Paula, and you're listening to the Let's Roll podcast with host Double R. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media. Find links in the description below or at theletsrollpodcast.com.